If you've ever ridden a roller coaster, then you probably know the feeling when you are ascending towards the top of the hill and your stomach just kind of drops and you start to question your decision making and whether you should have gotten on this thing. That's essentially how I am feeling this week as I return to the podcast with this new focus where I'm sharing behind the scenes as I pursue a goal to reach 1 million people through my speaking and my writing. And specifically today's episode, I'm sharing this public tracker that I'm going to be using throughout this journey. And it has real and somewhat sobering numbers that I will show you. And I'll explain which ones I chose, why I chose to track these, and also my reaction to seeing the numbers as they are now and just how far I actually have to go. Because honestly, it's pretty far. I also want to say if you are new here, welcome. I am Kat, and on this podcast, I'm sharing my personal experiments to help me follow through on what matters and to find my momentum as a speaker and a writer. That's what we're doing here. And because this first episode of this new direction is sort of kicking things off, I wanted to focus on what is it that I am tracking? A few people have asked, how do you actually count if you have reached the goal or not? Like, how do you calculate if you've reached those people? So, we're going to go over that. I'll share the actual tracker. I'll also share how you can access it, and you can access it at any time and see how I'm doing. And so, we're going to get all into that. Now, before I do, I want to kind of pull back to an idea. It's a concept I have shared before, but I think it's really relevant, and it's about how I look at goals. Because I have stated this public goal of reaching 1 million people with speaking and writing. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of how I'm calculating it, but I would like to take a moment to recap the three different types of goals and where does this land on the spectrum. And so I'm going to show a visual, and if you are listening to the audio, I'm going to I'll walk you through it. But essentially, whenever we have a goal, I often picture that it's kind of far off and up away, like I'm climbing a hill, that is the outcome. It's far away and there's a flag pointed or planted on the top of the hill, and that's where I'm trying to go. That's where I'm trying to climb. And when I am working on my own goals, I actually like to have them laid out on a graph where along the bottom of this graph or chart, that's where we have the time horizon. And along the kind of going up and down, this is control. And towards the bottom, it's the most control. But as you kind of climb higher and higher, you have a little bit less control. And ultimately, this outcome goal is the thing that's at the top of the mountain. It's far away, it's the furthest thing on the time horizon, but it's also the thing that you don't have total control over. And that's where I think about outcome goals. The next level, which is sort of in the center of the graph. So it's a little bit further away than right now in time horizon, but it's closer. And also you do have more control. This is your performance. So how you actually do as you are making your way towards your outcome goal. And then finally, there's what I call the process goal. And this is just what are the things that you actually have to do to get there. So if I'm trying to climb a mountain, my outcome is where I want to get. The performance is me moving in the direction towards the top of that mountain, but I have to take step after step after step to get there. So the other way to look at this is thinking about your destination, where you want to get, the direction you need to travel in order to get there, and then what are the daily actions or the daily steps that you have to take. And I think a really simple analogy or just a simple example, just a straight up example would be an athlete. So often with an athlete who's competing, maybe you want to win a gold medal. That is the destination. That's the top of the mountain, but you don't have complete control over who you're competing against. So you can't guarantee that you are going to win a gold medal. But what you can work on is the direction that you're traveling. And that is setting new personal best records, just trying to get better and better at your craft every single time you work on it. And that is that performance that you're working on over time and that you can actually measure, are you getting better at this? And then finally, there's the daily action, which is actually going to your practices, following your training program, whatever you need. So I think an athlete is just a really relatable one. Now, for mine, let's take a look at mine. My destination, this outcome, which I have publicly declared, is to reach 1 million people. And this is through speaking and writing. Now, the direction, the performance that I have, this performance goal, is that I want my speaking and writing to have a high impact. And when I say high impact, I mean that I am hearing from people that it had an impact. So I'm getting feedback, I'm having responses to what I'm doing. But the other way you can measure it, or the other way I plan to measure it, is am I getting more referrals? Are people saying, oh, this is good. You really need to book her for speaking, or hey, you need to read this article or this piece that Kat wrote, or when the book is out, hey, you really need to buy this book. And so, is it referable? Is it shareable? Is it the type of thing that people, it's so good, the quality is good enough, and the impact is actually happening? And that's something with each repeated step, I can make sure that I'm focusing on enhancing the quality, which brings me to that final thing, which is that process goal. This is where I need to regularly publish and I need to present regularly. And each time I do that, I can focus on quality, focus on getting a little bit better. How do I make sure that the message is getting across? And so I wanted to sort of go over that because this is what's lining up what I'm actually doing when it comes to what I'm tracking and how I'm actually measuring this. Because at the end of the day, yes, I have this goal of reaching 1 million people, but and it's an ambitious, fairly audacious goal when I look at the numbers, especially when you're going to see where I am starting from. And it's not zero, but it in relation to 1 million, it feels like it might as well be. I want to share that because ultimately the goal gives me that direction. It's that thing to look towards. It's that the peak of the mountain, the place where it's like, I really would like to get up there. Now, I don't have full control, but what I can control are the actions I take regularly and also my performance. And am I getting better? Is the quality getting better? And does it have an impact on people? And so that to me is actually focusing in that middle, that performance is actually what's more important than the outcome. It's that direction that I want to travel. But I think having that audacious goal, it really does feel like a motivating factor and it's something I want to climb towards. So let's actually look at the tracker. So this public tracker that I set up, and you can actually see it if you go to katmelvahill.com/tracker. And I'll share that. I'll make sure that that's linked. But over here, we've got this, I've got a screen share that I'm showing. And if you're listening, I'm just going to walk you through it. But on this public page, at the top, I just remind people what it is. And also the whole purpose of reaching people is I want to shift perspectives around follow through, the reasons people don't follow through, and just shift it because I think there's just so much blame and shame around if you're not following through, you genuinely want to do something and you're not doing it. I think that can be really hard. Well, I know it can be. I know it's hard. And the more I start to do this work, the more I realize I'm kinder to myself, I'm more compassionate, and I also can start focusing on what's really getting me stuck. So down here on this tracker, I have, so aside from the blurb of what it is, I call it monthly tracking. So my intention is that I am going to track on a monthly basis what my numbers are. However, I'm going to make an effort to update every week as part of my podcast prep because on this podcast, I'm sharing real numbers. I'm talking about what works, what is not working. I want to update it every week. That also means that I can see when I'm kind of trailing behind my goals and make sure that on a weekly basis, I'm trying to keep up. But when I look at a whole month, it also gives me some breathing room because there are going to be some weeks that are harder or busier if I am traveling for work or if just life's again, then I have a little bit of breathing room. But by updating it every week, I'm making sure that I'm keeping it top of mind. So what will happen and what I've set up so far is that I've got the month of August, so August 2026, because we're recording this at the end of July, is that I will start tracking how many posts. So I said I have to publish. And so how many times have I actually published my writing? And I think I'll also include speaking. So if I post a video, that is also sharing the message and getting that out there. And so that's me refining and honing how I share this, what I'm saying. And so you'll see I've got my goal and my actual. So you'll be able to follow along with, am I reaching the goal that I set out? The next one that I'm tracking is outreach. And this has to do with me reaching out to contacts, making new contacts, having conversations about booking speaking engagements, because that is a big part of what I want to be doing as part of earning a living. I want to be in front of crowds. I love speaking. I've done it for so many years. My very first job out of school was traveling around talking to groups of people. And it's where I come alive and it's what I love doing. So I want to make sure I'm reaching out to people though, because those gigs aren't just going to fall in my lap. Maybe later, as I start to get that performance goal and I'm more referable, they might get more inbound. But right now I have some work to do with outreach. Then the third thing I have on this tracker is the results of my outreach, just to show you what's actually happening. Now, I have this broken into two categories: appearances and booked speaking gigs. They are separate because I see them as two different things. An appearance is a public appearance, like being interviewed on a podcast. I cannot know for a fact how many people I reach. So they're not actually part of my total number, but they are part of getting the message out there in front of people. And so I think it's still an important thing to track. Whereas booked speaking gigs, that's when there's just a defined number of people who can be in the room. This can be in person, but it can also be virtual. And when it comes to the booked speaking gigs, this is where either there's a concrete group, like doing a presentation for a specific community or at a conference, etc. Or it could be a little bit wider, like an open thing that people can come to, but at the end of the day, I'll be able to actually count how many people attended. And so that is a speaking gig. Booked speaking gigs, just for the record, in case you're wondering, these can be paid or unpaid. There are some examples where I think it will be worthwhile to have a complimentary, like waive the speaker fee. But because I am a person who needs to earn a living, I also want to make sure that I'm focusing on some paid opportunities, and not some. I would like multiple paid opportunities. The other thing that, even though I'm starting the public tracking for August, I have summarized in the outreach results how many I have done since I have shifted and started talking about follow through and momentum. And so from January 2025, which is when I first announced that this was the direction I'm taking, until the end of the month, I have had 5 appearances. So being a guest, appearing either on podcast or a summit. And then I also have had 11 speaking gigs. That's a combination of in person, but also virtual. And actually, I think that the virtual outnumbers, it is much easier, obviously, to do a virtual presentation than it is for the in-person. But I love being in the room. And so I want to increase that. Finally, the outcome. This is where I am tracking the outcome. Obviously, I don't have any numbers for August because that hasn't happened yet. But for the January 2025 until the end of July 2026, I have calculated approximately how many people have been in the audiences. Now, there were some talks that I did where I don't have the exact number. Some of the virtual ones have recordings and I can actually see. And for others, I have the registration, or actually Zoom, for example, can give a report of how many people showed up and attended the meeting. So I use those numbers where possible. For conferences, I had estimated those numbers at the event. So they might not be 100%, but I think they're pretty darn close. And so for speaking gigs, like being in front of people in the audience, there's 392 right now. And then for subscribers, this is my current newsletter subscriber count. It's 3,369. And adding those two together, this is how I am going to be tracking my 1 million, is by adding the numbers of people I've spoken to for speaking engagements, and the number of people who are subscribed to my newsletter, meaning they are actually receiving my writing and they've opted in and said, yes, I want to hear your message. So the total right now is 3,761. Now, the difference between that and between 1 million feels like about a million. So I have a really long way to go, but it also is so seeing these numbers, my reaction is a little bit of that drop in the stomach of, oh boy, what have I done? But also I do feel inspired, and you have to start somewhere. Now, the other thing I want to share about this reaction and like when I look at the numbers so far, I will admit that I have a very mixed reaction, especially to seeing that I have a category which is January 2025, when I first publicly said this is what I'm doing now, to July 2026, which is right now. That's a very long time. And seeing the numbers the way they are, I feel a little bit of a disappointment and simultaneously compassion. So, disappointment because I think there were many more opportunities that I have potentially had or missed out, that I could have been in front of more people. I probably could have had a few more speaking engagements. And also, as I have shared publicly, I had a very difficult year last year. I lost my brother and I stepped away from my work for a long time. And it was a very emotionally trying year. And so there have been some real challenges that are indisputable challenges that made it harder for me to do some of this work regularly. So I can hold both. I can see that there's some missed potential, but I can also understand the place that I was coming from. Now, the reason I share this is because one of the main reasons I want to do this public accountability, this have a public tracker, share what's working, what's not working, is because the reason I didn't do as much outreach is because of how I work and because of how I'm wired. I am somebody who genuinely works better when I'm accountable to someone. I technically work better with a boss, but I am my own boss. And that's part of the inspiration for taking this new direction with my podcast is I am not alone. There are so many people out there who are self-employed. They are their own boss and they work better when they have a boss. And so it is a real challenge. So many entrepreneurs have ADHD, or even if they don't have ADHD, they just are someone who works better when there's a real deadline and there's true accountability. In a way, I guess, by sharing this publicly, I am kind of turning the public into my boss in a way, except that at the end of the day, it's still the buck stops with me. And yes, I can share this, but I also know no one's coming in and tapping on my shoulder. And I really want to make part of this is making a commitment to this matters to me. It's important to me. So how can I make sure that I'm following through? The tracker is just one of those things. This is part of the experiment that I'm trying by building in public and being public about my goals. But that's not all. And so over the next number of episodes, I'll share some of the other things I've been trying recently. But this truly is my effort to share experiments in what interventions, what strategies can truly work for a person like myself, who if there's no urgency or there's no real deadline or there's no accountability, it is harder for me to follow through on things. And so what am I doing? What's working? What's not? And I do really want to be candid and share things. For example, in an upcoming episode, I will share one of the reasons that my newsletter, so my newsletter subscriber number, I have had this newsletter for almost 7 years. And when I see that number, the 3,300, give or take, I I genuinely think to myself, man, I have so many missed opportunities to, have more people to be on my list. And there are a lot of real reasons that I sort of self-sabotaged on that. So I'm going to share what happened there, why that number is much lower than I think it could be based on how long I've been at this. That being said, I've changed directions and I know that's part of it, but there's some reasons, and I will share those. Those are coming up on one of the next episodes. I'll be sharing a little bit of behind the scenes around why my newsletter growth was so stalled and what are some of the things I'm doing to change it. But today's episode, really, I just wanted to take you through the tracker, explaining. So the tracker is katmelville.com/tracker. You can see that. Hopefully the intention is updated once a week, but ultimately I will be tracking this at the monthly level. And I just wanted you to understand what I'm tracking, why I am tracking it. And if I'm being really honest, at the moment, this roller coaster thing, it kind of feels like, oh, wow, there's so much to do. And this week, I'm really trying to catch myself when I am feeling overwhelmed or when it feels like the list of all the things I want to do is starting to feel overwhelming, and just remember that the things that need to happen will happen. I need to temper my expectations. Now, the other thing is that currently this tracker does not have goals yet. And that is because I'm giving myself a few more days before August starts to decide what are my goals for the month, knowing I tend to be a person who picks an overly ambitious target and then I start to feel like, whoa, what have I done? This is too much. So I also want to be realistic about those targets that I set, both for my posting total and also my outreach total. What are realistic numbers that I can do to start? I think that that is, I think that that's one of the most important things I can do is just make sure I temper my expectations and also learn from past experiences where I have just swung a little bit too far and then regretted it. So start slow. I think it's better to maybe lower the bar as I get started, but I haven't decided those yet. I can share those next week of what are the actual targets that I am starting with. And hopefully you will come along for the journey and just see how this goes. I think there'll be good weeks, there'll be bad weeks, and my intention is to just not hide it and to share the real challenges, but also share some of the successes along the way as I follow through on what matters and find momentum.